Hi, I'm Jez from First Coding, and welcome to this video series on building lockdown letters in Scratch. In this video, we'll be looking at how we manage, design, and code the targets that feature in the game. Please remember that files associated with this project and other fun projects and tutorials can be downloaded and obtained from the link provided. Okay, let's get started.
In this section of Lockdown Letters tutorial, we're going to be looking at the target. So when we start our game and we launch it, you'll notice one house at random has a target. And that target has a lifespan. And when it's finished, it moves on to the next one, encouraging the player then to launch their plane to the target in a given time limit. Failure to do so means that the target moves on to the next house. So let's have a look at how we're going to code it. If we go to our work area for our tutorial, you can see that I've already created a separate sprite. And I've designed it really simply with just an exclamation mark in a circle. And it can be anything you want it to be. It can be a star, it can be a tick, it could even be an arrow. It's entirely up to you. As long as it fits in with the general feel and theme of your game, it can be anything. But for this example, we're going to be having our target, we're going to give the appearance like you're seeing on screen now. So our target, if we go back to our game, watch it, our target grows and shrinks, grows and shrinks, grows and shrinks 3 times before it disappears, and it picks another house at random and repeats the same process, grows and shrinks, grows and shrinks. Now to do this, it's quite complicated, but if we chop the task up into little bits and take each part one at a time, we'll get there. So the first thing we are going to need to do is grab our green flag and ensure that our target is hidden from view until the game has started. So again, grab your green flag and your hide block from the look section. As we know from the previous tutorial, everything is triggered by that start message, by the broadcasting of that start message when the title screen has been clicked on. So back into events, and we're going to need the when I receive start message again. Okay, we are also going to create a function. Now a function is a block of code designed to do one particular task. And that function just sits there floating around in our program until it receives a message to say run the contents, run yourself and run your code blocks to do your particular task. So we are going to create a function that will plot the target at a random position and then shrink and grow it, shrink and grow it, shrink and grow it 3 times before it disappears. To create a function in Scratch, we use something called myBlocks. And as you can see, there's nothing there. That's because we haven't made a block yet. We haven't created our function. If we click on the Make a Block, we have the opportunity to name our functions. Okay, and just like we give our variables names, we give our broadcasting message names, we're going to name our function sensibly. So the name of our function should describe what it's going to do. And we're going to call it plot target because that's what it's going to do. We can also pass in a couple of parameters if we want to. So parameters are incoming values. And we are going to create 2 of them. So we click on this button here because our inputs, incoming values are going to be numbers. And just imagine we're naming our incoming values as variables. So we're going to call this one the x coordinate, and we're going to call this one the y. So we're going to create a function called plot target. And when we want to run the plot target function, we're going to say, run yourself, and I'd like you to plot your target at these coordinates that we pass it. All will become clear later on. If we click on OK, you can see here that it's created this massive pink header block, okay, with our name of our function. And you can have as many functions as you want to in your games, but for this example, we only need to create one. So the first thing that we need to do, because we've previously hidden it when we start the game, we are going to need to show it. Okay, and once it's shown, we are going to need to plot it. So we're going to plot it at coordinates x and y. So if we go to motion, grab our usual go to x and y, and instead of writing any coordinates that we want to in it, we can actually pick these up. These are actually labels. So it's basically saying whatever value you have been passed for the x, plot it along with whatever you have for the y. Again, all will become clearer later on. Okay, so we show it and we plot it at the values that we're passing into our function. Because we want the target to start off small and then grow and then shrink again, we can actually govern the size of it via the code. Rather than go into its appearance, we can shrink it and grow it through our code. And we do that through the looks again, because we are changing the way our sprite appears. So if you go into looks, we can set the size to any percentage we want to. And we're going to set it to 20%. Okay. Because we are getting it to grow and shrink 3 times, we could write the same code out 3 times that grows it and shrinks it, but that's not very efficient. We can write it in a better way if we use a loop. So if we go into control, we can find we have a repeat loop. Okay, and any code blocks that go in this repeat loop will run for as many times as we specify. So for example, if we put code in now, those code blocks will run 10 times repeatedly. Because we only want it to grow and shrink 3 times, we are only going to repeat it 3 times. Okay, and we are going to put in another repeat. We are also going to put in another change size. Okay, we're going to change size this time by 1. Change size by 1. So we are going to repeat the changing of the size by 1 each time. And we might put in a little pause as well, just so it doesn't run away with us. And we're going to make it a very minute pause of maybe 0.1 second. So this, every 0.1 second, this is going to loop round and change the percentage by 1. So it's going to grow and grow and grow for 10 times. Okay, and when that loop has finished, we're going to put in another one. Okay, again, repeating 10. Change size, but this time it's going to be -1. Okay, so we've built it up and now we're going to shrink it. Okay, and again, just put in a little pause of 0.1 second, just so we can see that change happening, because these loops run really quick, instantaneous sometimes, and so instead of seeing the gradual shrinking and growing of our sprite, it'll just go from big to small straight away and small to big straight away. So by adding these little pauses in, we're actually slowing the process down so we can see all the sizes that it's passing through. Okay. And then once those loops have finished, we're going to hide it because the time's up, basically. The time is up. So if we haven't hit that target in this cycle here, then it hides. And again, for good measure, we'll just put in a second pause before it relocates to another house. So that's our function. Okay, so we've created our function that plots a target at a given X and Y coordinate, and we've used our repeat loops to grow it and shrink it 3 times before it hides itself, pauses, and then we'll program it to relocate to another house. So how do we get it to relocate to another house? Well, we need to create a few variables in which to control this aspect of the game. So back into our variables, make a variable at the top here, and the variables that we need to create are X, and we need to create one called Y, and a final one called random number, and all become clear in a second. Oh, there is already one called random number, so we're going to call one called just random. Okay, and as you can see, it puts it on our screen here. We don't really need to see these in the game, so I'm just going to untick them to hide them from view. Okay. So what we're going to do here, we're going to start building the code for this section here. So when we receive the start message, what's going to happen? Well, the first thing we are going to need to do is create a loop, create a forever loop, because we don't actually know how long the game is going to last. Sometimes the game might last 10 seconds, other times it might last 10 minutes. We just don't know. And for that reason, we're going to put it all in a forever loop. The first thing we do when the code runs is we're going to generate a random number for our random variable. So we're going to grab our set block. Okay. Now the set block allows us to write a value to a particular variable. Imagine a variable like a cardboard box, and in that box we can store data. In this case, we are generating random numbers and storing it in our cardboard box. We can specify what variable we want to set, and we can just pick any number if we want to, 5, 7, or whatever. But the thing is, we'll always know that it's going to be a 7. So let's generate a random number. Back into operators. We've previously used this block before. We pick random number. Okay, and I am going to get it to pick a random number between 1 and 3. The more houses that you'd like it to appear above, the bigger this number needs to be. Okay, so we are going to build the logic that plots the target on 3 random locations in our game. To do that, we need to go into control. We're going to use this if, not the if-else block, but just the smaller of the two, the if-then. Drag it in. Okay, so the if-then is basically looking for a particular scenario, a particular condition. So if something happens, then run this particular bit of code, or if something else happens, run some other code instead. So what we're checking for, we are checking to see back into operators, we're going to grab an equals block. We are going to see if our random number is equal to 1. So if Scratch picks a random number of 1 and stores it in the random variable, we are doing a check to see if when random equals 1, what happens? Well, if random equals 1, we are going to get our target to appear above this house here. So I'm moving my sprite over there, and as you can see, these coordinates change accordingly. So every time I move my sprite, we get a different coordinate. Okay? So just like coordinates on a map, these help pinpoint that exact position that that sprite is currently in. And what we're going to do, do you remember these X and Y coordinates that we initially set up? Well, we are going to set those using two set blocks. We need to specify, we're going to set X, and we're going to set Y. Okay? And it's just a case of moving your target over the desired house that you want and making a note of these coordinates. So X, we're going to set X to -148, and we're going to set Y to -75. Okay? So if Scratch picks a random number between 1 and 3, if it picks 1, then it goes to these coordinates. What happens if it picks 2? Well, we need to build another if for that. Instead of building it again from the very beginning, what we could do is we could sneakily copy this block here. So right click, duplicate, and it creates an exact copy of what we've just built. And we can bolt it in underneath the existing if. As long as it's all contained in this forever loop, that's absolutely fine. We do need to tweak these duplicated blocks though, ever so slightly. So the first thing we need to do is specify what happens when random equals 2. So when Scratch picks a random number of 2 and stores it in the random variable, what's going to happen? Well, exactly the same process as before. We move our target over to a house that we want it to appear above. So let's go with that one. Let's straighten it up a bit, like so. And we make a note of these new coordinates. So X is 126 and Y is 8. And we're going to do it for a third location. So again, right click, duplicate, and we copy it into our forever loop, which is growing now. It's getting quite big. Let's change it to 3. So what happens when our random variable has a value of 3 generated for it? Well, it's going to appear, let's go for this one here. And again, we've got our new coordinates. Make a note of them in our set blocks, 135 and 20. Okay, so now we have our variables X and Y with given coordinates based on 3 random locations in our town. And it's those variables which we take with their new values and we run our plot target function, passing in those X and Y coordinates, and then it filters through the function like we've coded as we explained previously. To run a function, we go back into my blocks, and you can see here we have a new pink block called plot target. Drag it over and we'll put it in this forever loop. Okay, so as you can see, it sets all the X and Y coordinates, and finally it'll run the plot target function, but there's 2 spaces available. What goes in these 2 spaces? Well, it's the X and Y, isn't it? The X and Y that we're setting with these variables here. So if we go back into our variables section, you can see we've got labels that we can drag out. So it's saying whatever you've got set for X and whatever you've got set for Y, run the plot target function with those X and Y values that you've previously set in your ifs. It handles the next lot of processing over to this function. So we run the plot target with the X and Y that we're passing in, and it does its thing as we've described previously. Very, very complicated. You might want to rewind this tutorial and step through it bit by bit. But hopefully the more times you practice this, the more familiar you'll become with setting variables, if statements, and setting up and creating functions within your games or other programs. So let's give it a run. So let's hit the green flag, launch the game. Okay, we have a target growing and shrinking, and it disappears before it reappears again at another random location. So if you remember, the locations are governed by this random number each time. Luckily, it's chosen 1, 2, and 3, so we can prove that it works for all 3 locations within our town. And you can create as many locations for this target as you would like, but you must remember to increase this number each time, and also build a different if for every location that you want the target to appear within your town. And we'll leave it there.